We say never forget and never again, over and over, but since the end of World War II, there have been over 100 million deaths due to genocide. So let us listen and think and then act in order to mitigate and try to stop this scourge of mankind. I'm going to introduce our guest speaker in just a second, but those of you who have questions, please put them, type them into Q&A or into chat, and we'll get to those. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ewa Schaller. She's the Senior Program Officer dealing with education and coordination of that with American Friends of Yahad-In Unum. And you'll see the logo there for that in the center of your screen. Dr. Schaller conducts teachers' seminars, lectures, and other educational events in coordination with the educational program of Yahad-In Unum in Paris. She holds a PhD in Humanities from the University of Torun, Poland, where she originally comes from. Deeply interested in the Holocaust history that has marked so much of her country's history and identity, she joined American Friends of Yahad-In Unum after she moved to New York City in 2015. Before joining the organization, she taught literature and history at her home city's university for more than 10 years. So let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Schaller, and I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John. Thank you for this introduction, and thank you for the invitation. It's really a great pleasure and a great honor to be here. For me, for all of you who joined us, thank you so much for being with us. I hope you will be fine dealing with my mixed up French-Polish accent. Polish-French, more this way. But if anything needs to be clarified, at the end, I will be happy to do so. So this presentation is dedicated to the Holocaust by bullets, this genocide in broad daylight, which is still a kind of unknown chapter of the Holocaust history. And I would like actually to start this presentation by introducing someone to you. And this someone is this man. This is Vasyl. He was born in 1929 in Babczyńce. So Babczyńce, as you can see here on this map, is located in Ukraine. This is southern Ukraine, very close to the Ukrainian and Moldovan border. Vasyl is one of our eyewitnesses, and I will speak about this entire idea of eyewitness in just a few seconds. He was interviewed by our team, Yahad-In Unum team, last year in the middle of this pandemic. And Vasyl shared this story of the Jewish community from Babczyńce. As he says, there was a small Jewish community in Babczyńce before the war. Approximately 20 Jewish families lived there. All these Jewish people were killed in two massacres that took place in Babczyńce. An approximate number of 100 Jewish victims died in each of those massacres. We were able to identify both killing sites in Babczyńce. And then while telling this story of what happened in his town, Vasyl shared with our team a story which might look like a side story, but which has become for me actually the essence of his testimony. So the interesting thing is that before the war, his German teacher was Jewish. It was a Jewish woman. Her name was Anna Moisevna. And she had a 3-year-old daughter, and on the day of the killing, when the Jews were gathered, Vasyl came to see her, and he said, "You can stay with us. You can stay in our home. We have a hiding place for you. You can be safe with your daughter." And Anna Moisevna did not accept this offer. She just didn't want to put the entire family at risk. She said, "If they find me, we all will be killed. You, your mother, your father, your sister's brother, yourself, myself." She didn't want to do this, and so she went with all the other Jewish people. She was killed on this day along with her daughter. This is the place, this is the killing site. This is what it looks like today. This is not the burial site. So actually there were 3 Jewish survivors in this town. And after the war, Vasyl, with one of those survivors, was able to arrange a reburial of the bodies. So the bodies were taken out of this pit and they were put in a new grave. There is a monument. This is what it looks like. And Anna's house, by the way, is still there. This is what it looks like today. So it's slightly falling apart, as you can see. But the interesting thing in Vassel's testimony is that when Anna was just about to leave, she was just about to go to this killing site, she said to him, "You will survive and you will tell our story." And those words, "you will tell our story," they stay with me. Actually, I came across this testimony quite by accident, but this is really the essence, I think, of the work that Yahad is doing in Eastern Europe, to tell the story of those victims, the story of those victims who died by mass shootings, by Holocaust, by bullets in all of those countries of the former Soviet Union, is rarely told, actually. And we are speaking here about 2 million victims. When you think about this overall number of the victims of the Holocaust, 6 million, 1/3 of those victims died by mass shootings. They died in those countries of the former Soviet Union. They did not die in gas chambers, in death camps, in concentration camps. During the deportation from Western and Central Europe to the death camps, they died, as I said, by mass shootings in those fields, ravines, forests all across Eastern Europe. In some of those places today, you will find memorials, you will find stones, you will find fences, like here in Lithuania or in Poland. In some of them, like the one in Ukraine that I'm showing here, or in Russia, there is absolutely nothing. And if we know that a mass shooting took place on this side, we know this partially from the archives. Those places are oftentimes mentioned in the archives. Sometimes they are not. And the only way for us to know is to speak to people, those eyewitnesses who were there at the time of the events and who are still able to testify today. And this presentation will be about those victims who died in Eastern Europe. And this presentation will be also about those eyewitnesses, people who testify today. Before we get to this, just a few words about the Holocaust by bullets itself. As you all know, the Holocaust by bullets started with the invasion of the Soviet Union on June 22nd, 1941, under the name of Operation Barbarossa. Now, the war against the Soviet Union was a very particular war. It was called the War of Extermination by Hitler himself. It was obviously the war for the living space for the Nazi nation, but more importantly, it was the war between two ideologies, between National Socialism and the Bolshevism. Hitler instructed very well his generals before the invasion, telling them that the victors would be those who would be able to destroy completely this opposite ideology, including all of its supporters. And those supporters, the supporters of the Bolshevism for Hitler, were the Jews. They were not only the racial enemy number one of the Nazi Germany, they also were the ideological enemy number one. While invading the Soviet Union, Hitler is going to use, as he did this also for Poland in 1939, he's going to use special units called Einsatzgruppen. Those units are sent right behind the Wehrmacht army. As I said, the Einsatzgruppen were already used in Poland during the invasion in 1939, and they were unfortunately extremely efficient. Hitler and Himmler, by the way, learned a great deal of lesson from those operations of the Einsatzgruppen in Poland, and they were able to make their operations in the Soviet Union even better organized, even more efficient. 4 Einsatzgruppen are sent to the Soviet Union, and each of them is attached to a particular army group, and each of them covers a particular territory. So very briefly, the Einsatzgruppe A is attached to the Army Group North and is going to cover the entire territory of today's Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. The Einsatzgruppe B is attached to the Army Group Center, and it is going to cover the entire territory of Belarus. The Einsatzgruppe C is attached to the Army Group South and is going to take care of northern and central Ukraine. And finally, the Einsatzgruppe D is attached to the 11th Army, and it's going to start in Romania, and then it will go through southern Ukraine, including Crimea, and then further east. I will not get very much into details about the Einsatzgruppen, but I just would like to highlight 2 points. The Einsatzgruppen are the main responsible for the mass shootings of the Jewish populations in Eastern Europe. They were in charge. However, the important thing to say is that they were not alone. They were greatly helped by a great number of police units and other specialized Nazi groups. They were helped by the Wehrmacht army as well. The Wehrmacht army was supposed to provide all the logistical support that the Einsatzgruppen might need during their operations. They were also helped by the local police in all of those countries, so they didn't act alone. We speak here about 3,000 men in the Einsatzgruppen themselves, helped by thousands of other men. This number of 3,000 remained quite stable throughout the war, even when there was a rotation, and some men would come back to Berlin, some other would be sent to the Eastern Front. Now, the other important thing that I would like to highlight is that the original task that was given to the Einsatzgruppen before the invasion, and this word before is here extremely important. So the original task that was given to the Einsatzgruppen was the one of preventive security units. They were supposed to keep this entire occupied territory clean and safe from any potential or real threat for the Nazi regime. And they were also supposed to make sure that the transition between the military administration, the civilian administration is going to go smoothly. Their main target was this ideological enemy. These were the state party members, the Communist Party members at the national level, at the local level as well, those who might have any kind of potential real connection, dangerous connection to the Communist Party, Jews in service of the Communist Party as well, and then, as it was said, other extremist elements, partisans, saboteurs, and so on and so forth. So before the invasion of the Soviet Union, they were not given an explicit mandate to eliminate entire Jewish populations in Eastern Europe. This is, however, what is going to happen, and the switch between those preventive security operations and a genocide that is going to happen in Eastern Europe happens between August and early October of 1941, very briefly after the invasion. And by the beginning of October, actually, of 1941, all the Einsatzgruppen units know that their target are the Jews, all of them, including the women, the children, the elderly people, and this is precisely what is going to happen. Now, a few words about what kind of crime it was. First of all, the Holocaust by bullets is a mobile crime, as you can see it here. We are used to think about a Holocaust in which the victims are brought to the killer. In a Holocaust by bullets, the opposite thing happens. The killers come to the victims. Those who were mobile are those Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing squads. And they were going from town to town and from village to village, trying to make this entire territory Judenfrei, free of Jews. The Einsatzgruppen were extremely well motorized units. According to certain studies, they were even better motorized than certain groups of the Wehrmacht army in June of 1941 when the invasion happened. So that's the first very important thing to be said about the Holocaust by bullets. The second thing is that it was a locally rooted crime. Now, what I understand by this, I understand many things by this locally rooted crime, and I will try to explain them briefly and clearly. The first important thing is that the Nazis used for their killing operations the system that we call the system of requisition. And the system of requisition existed in the Soviet Union way before the Nazis invaded the country. The system of requisition meant that the head of the administration, of the local administration in the Soviet Union, the head of a kolkhoz, this collective firm, and we know that many of those collective firms were present in the Soviet landscape before the invasion of the Soviet Union. So the head of the administration, the head of the kolkhoz, could send at any point in time his messengers to the local people, telling them, you report tomorrow 5 a.m., 6 a.m. with your spade, with your carts, you just report because we need you to do something for the community. And those tasks were very different. They had to dig the pits for the vegetables for winter, or transport something from the field to a warehouse, and so on and so forth. So this system was in place, and when the Nazis came, they knew that it existed and they knew how to use it. So they did the exact same thing, using in many cases the same local administration and the same messengers who were sent to those local people, telling them, we need you to report tomorrow 5 a.m., 6 a.m. You come because we need you to do something. And in many cases, those people didn't even know what they were requisitioned for. They were used to this system, and they were also used to the fact that they shouldn't ask any questions. They just should do whatever they were asked to do. Those people were used by the Nazis to perform a great number of different tasks during those killings. They were used to dig the graves, to cover the graves, to transport the Jewish belongings from the killing site to the town. They had to sort out the Jewish belongings. Sometimes they had to prepare meals for the perpetrators when the killings lasted a longer time. And again, this list of tasks we could go on. These were many things that they were requisitioned for. When I speak about those requisitioned people, this is a different category from the local police or local collaborators, those who signed up willingly to work along with the Nazis. But they were present, obviously, in many of those places as well. And the last element to this locally rooted crime is, I think, the local administration, which was used by the Nazis and which was extremely helpful in providing the lists of the Jewish people, their places of living, their addresses, which was very helpful in requisitioning people as well to perform those different tasks for the Nazis. So there were different degrees of implication. I hope this is clear. And one thing is certain, without this implication of the local population, the Nazis wouldn't have been able to carry out this crime as efficiently and as quickly as they carried out in reality. And finally, the last thing that I would like to say about the Holocaust by bullets is that it was a public crime. There was no secret about those killings. The Jews were arrested in those towns during the day. They were conducted to the killing site during the day. The mass shootings were taking place during the day. And people actually in certain locations, they could come and watch. And in certain cases, they would come and they would watch. Why would they do this? This is a separate question, but if you take a closer look at this photo that you can see here, you can see those victims up here in a pit. Obviously, you can see the perpetrators. You can see those two officers. One is giving the order to shoot, the other one will direct the victims into the pit. But then if you look further, you will see there's quite a crowd here, and these are not the victims. These are people who came to watch. As I said, why they came to watch, that's a separate question. And I am not saying that this is what happened systematically in all of those locations. In many of them, people didn't go outside because they were afraid and they thought they would be the next victims. In certain locations, they were not allowed to approach the place, and you would have only the curious children coming to see what was happening. In certain locations, they were forced to watch. So again, different case scenarios that happened in all of those locations, but in some of them, those killings, and I apologize for the wording, were the event of the year. This is how public it was, and this is why we will speak about the genocide in broad daylight. Now, just a few words. So whatever I will present now moving forward will be based on those eyewitness testimonies that Yahad-In Unum team was able to collect in those countries of Eastern Europe. So just a few words about the organization, which most of you certainly know. The organization is based in Paris and was founded by Father Patrick Desbois, whom again you probably know. It was founded already 16 years ago, and it is dedicated to identifying and documenting those sites of mass executions committed against the Jews and Roma in Eastern Europe. Now, the work of Yahad is really an investigative work. This is an investigation on what we could call a cold case, a case that remains unresolved. And in order to resolve this case, what the teams will do is that they will first go through all the information that is available about those crimes committed in these countries. So they will go through all the available archives, the German archives, especially the Soviet archives, which are a true mine of information about what happened in the countries of the former Soviet Union, also Polish archives, Romanian archives, and they will establish a list of the places where those crimes were perpetrated. They will establish the list of whatever we know about those crimes, who the perpetrators were, who the victims were, all the facts that we know and the facts that we do not know and which we should know in order to fully understand what happened in Eastern Europe. Once this list is established, an 11-people team go on an investigative trip to those different countries, and these are the most recent numbers from the end of the last year. So we have been able to interview thus far, because when we go on those trips, the important thing that I forgot to mention, we look for the eyewitnesses, for people who were there during the events, who were children or teenagers during the war, who saw the crime, or who saw one or two steps of the crime, and who are able and willing to testify today, to tell whatever they saw and to tell the story also of the Jewish community from their town. So those people who testified thus far, we were able to collect more than 7,200 testimonies from those eyewitnesses and to identify more than 3,000 execution sites in Eastern Europe. So those eyewitnesses, who are they, you might ask? So very quickly, we have divided them into 4 different categories. The first one are the neighbors, like Lyubina here. So the neighbors are the people whose houses were very close to the gathering point or to the road, or sometimes even to the killing site. Those killing sites were never very far from the towns, from the villages, so certain people could even observe them from their houses. The neighbors are also the people who, by coincidence, found themselves in a gathering point or close to the road through which the Jewish people were conducted to the killing site. As of Lyubina, as I said, so this building, this is the former school. And Lyubina, she's Ukrainian. She was at school with other kids. They had a lunch break. So she was here in this kind of field with other kids, and they saw the Jewish people being conducted through this road to the killing site. So she witnessed the road. She was then curious. That's the other category. Because she was curious, she followed the column with her classmate, and this is how she was also able to witness the mass shooting. So the curious, this is the second category. We must remember that most of those people, they were children, teenagers during the time of the events. They were curious. This is what they are saying themselves. And so they would follow the column just to find out what would happen. So Dmitro, whom you can see here, again from Ukraine, he heard gunshots. And so with his classmate, he climbed this very tree. And you can see here, the tree is still there. And he was able to witness the mass shooting of the Jewish women in his town. Then the next category are those requisitioned people whom I mentioned, like Yevgeny here. Yevgeny tells very specifically, he gives many details about his requisition. He was told in the evening to report with his cart the next morning. He wasn't told what for. He came with his cart and he was unfortunately able to witness the entire shooting of his friends. He had many Jewish friends. He then had to transport the Jewish belongings from the killing site to the town. Same thing for Nina. She was at school with other children. They were taken out of the school, told to dig a pit. And then they were brought back to the school. The doors were closed. They were told not to watch through the windows, which they obviously did. They saw the Jewish people approaching the pit. This is how they understood what or who the pit was for. After the shooting, they were also requisitioned to cover the pit. So these are the requisitioned people. And then finally, the forced are those who were forced to watch the execution. This is what happened in certain locations where the Nazis wanted to send a clear message. If you do not cooperate, this is what is going to happen to you. Now, I would like to walk you through those different steps of the crime with one of the witnesses whom we interviewed in Berdichev. Berdichev was a very, very Jewish city in Ukraine. That was one of the most Jewish cities in Ukraine, with a great Jewish population, which diminished after the Soviet Union was established, and then during the years of the communism in the 30s. In 1939, there were 23,000 Jewish people in Berdichev. Now, before the invasion of the Soviet Union, 1/3 of the Jewish population of Berdichev, including Jews from Poland, Jewish refugees from Poland who came to Berdichev after the invasion of Poland. So 1/3 of this entire population was able to escape. All the others stayed in Berdichev. They all perished in the Holocaust, which happened through a number of killing operations. I do not really have time, unfortunately, to go into detail again about those different operations, but just two things. There was a ghetto in Berdichev that was established at the end of August 1941, so very quickly after the city was occupied. And this ghetto was established for a very short period of time. because the liquidation, like the final liquidation of the ghetto, is going to take place at the end of October, beginning of November of 1941. But basically, almost the entire Jewish population from the ghetto is going to be killed through two large killing operations that take place at the beginning of September and then in mid-September of 1941. Approximately 13,000 people were killed in those operations, and they are very well mentioned in the Einsatzgruppen reports. For the first one, we even have the exact numbers of the Jewish people, the exact number of the Jewish women over 12 years who were killed at this time. So Anna, whose testimony I would like to show you here, she speaks about one of those operations that took place in September. And I will simply let you watch. This is a very brief excerpt from her testimony. It's about 3 minutes. And you will not hear her very well, for which I apologize, but you have subtitles, so you will be able to understand what she's saying.
To mісце з собою цінні речі. Собаками. Строго був ставлено. Цінні речі. Де вони йшли?
Okay, so the very interesting thing with this, with Anna, is that she's really able to speak about the day of the crime. And she's able to name and to describe different steps of the crime. Obviously, she is speaking from her perspective of a witness. There are many things she doesn't know. She doesn't know how this entire operation was prepared. This is the information that we will get from the perpetrator perspective. This kind of operation required an enormous preparation. You have to find a killing site. You have to find a manpower. You have to make sure that you have enough killers based on how big the Jewish population is, that you have enough ammunition, you have enough guns, you have people to arrest the Jewish people, to escort them to the killing site, to guard them at the killing site, and so on and so forth. This is a lot of preparation that precedes this kind of mass shooting that she obviously cannot know about because she's a witness of what happens on the day of the crime precisely. And I will really speak about her testimony on this day of the crime. The very first thing that she speaks about is the arrest. And when you take a look at those two sentences, there is a lot of information about how the arrest was organized in Berdichev for this particular killing. The Jews were told to take their valuables, gold, and then gather at a certain place. The perpetrators made sure that the Jews would have their valuables with them at the killing site so they can loot them. And then they had to gather at a certain place, and this is what happened in a great number of cases. The Jewish people are given an order to report at a certain time in a certain place, and it's very precise. And they were promised they would be deported somewhere else. And again, this is something that comes back very often. This language of deception is used systematically by the Nazis to make sure that the arrest is going to go smoothly, it will be quiet, it will be calm, and nobody will be against it. And people are promised to be taken somewhere else. They are promised to be taken to a better place. They are promised to be taken to work somewhere. Sometimes they are even promised to be taken to Palestine. This is what many witnesses talk about as well. Now, the arrest happens in many different ways. Here's another witness. She speaks about the arrest. In this case, in this location, the Jews were arrested directly in their houses. They were taken out of their houses. They had to spend the night in a school building, and then the next day they were taken to the killing site. In some other cases, the arrest could be very violent as well. Sometimes it's very quiet, and you can see, I will just show you this testimony here from Simferopol, when the witness says that everything was done without any violence. We said them goodbye because we thought they would leave for Palestine. And in certain cases, the arrest is extremely violent. And this is when the killings actually start, because people try to escape, they try to hide, and then there's the search through the houses to find those who are trying to hide. So this is when the killings sometimes start. Now, the arrest can take from a few hours to a few days, to a few weeks. In many cases also, there is already a ghetto in place in many of those locations. So the Jews will be gathered directly in the ghetto. So different case scenarios here for the arrest. I just wanted to go back to this photo. This is Lubny. There are many photos that were taken in Lubny. They were not taken during the shooting itself, but they were taken in this gathering point, and then during the road when people were walking to the gathering point. So you will find, when you look for information about a Holocaust by bullets, you will find many photos from Lubny, like these ones and these ones as well. And what the Jewish people in Lubny were told was that, so they should obviously present themselves on Thursday, October 16th. So you have this precise date, the precise address to be relocated. So again, this lie about the relocation, necessary to bring with you food for 3 days, warm clothes, to maintain the illusion of the relocation. Those who do not comply will be shot. Actually, some witnesses say that the Jewish people were wondering about what they should do. But because there was this lie about the relocation, and because they didn't really know where they were being taken, in some cases they knew, I will get back to this, in some other they didn't know, they would rather go than risk a sudden death in case they are found, and then they would be shot. So again, many different ways in which people will be arrested. I will just mention this because I am always impressed by the fact how this lie of relocation worked well. I will just mention this witness. He lives in Vinoy. This is southern Ukraine, and it was the Romanian occupation zone during the war. And his town became a transition town from the Jews who were deported by the Romanians from Bessarabia and northern Bukovina, which is today's Moldova. They spent 2 or 3 days in the witness's village, and he was able to make friends with one Jewish boy. His name was Izia. And when they had to continue their road, this witness parents spoke to Izia's parents and told him, Izia can stay with us. You don't have to take him. You don't know where you are going. And the interesting thing is that Izia's parents said no, because they thought that Izia would have a better life in this new place where they were going, rather than in this town where the witness lived. They were all killed in the German occupied zone a few days later. Once they are gathered, however this gathering looks like, the road starts. Usually the killing site is not far away from the town where those people spend their entire lives. So usually they walk. If the distance is a bit longer than trucks are used, the trucks are provided usually by, not usually, always by the Wehrmacht army, or the carts are used from the local population as well. Sometimes you will see carts or trucks used to transport children and the elderly people. But usually they walk, and it's quite impressive also to listen to the witnesses when they say that everybody was in this column, women, men, and children, and they oftentimes speak also about this endless column of people. Now, again, the shootings could also happen during the road when people were trying to escape, or they were too slow, they were too weak to walk. And again, we have a few photos from the road, from Krivoy Rog, from Lubny. Again, they walk here to the gathering point, and you can see the same road here. These 2 photos, I just have to mention them. They are from Kamieniec-Podolski. They were taken by a Hungarian Jew, actually. His name was Gyula Spitz, and because of his skills, he was a cab driver before the war. He wasn't sent to a labor camp, but he was incorporated into the army. He was a truck driver, and he stationed in Kamieniec-Podolski during the time of this massacre. This is one of the biggest massacres of the Holocaust by bullets. That's the end of August 1941. And he was able to take a few photos secretly. So you can see this one of this really endless column of people, 23,000 victims altogether. And he took this photo from his truck, and you can see this here. And then this is the second photo. This is the same column. You can actually recognize this girl and this tall man in the first photo. They are quite well visible, but you can see how sharp this photo is. He got off his truck. He's now in the street, looking at those people. They are looking at him, and walking to the killing site. And there are many men, but also women, young girls, this elderly man who is being helped by the others, walking to the killing site. Now, sorry, I have to skip a few slides because I have no time for them. Once they arrive to the killing site, the next step in many cases is the undressing. They have to undress. This is why, again, in many cases, they are told to take their valuables if they have any. If they spent a long time in a ghetto, obviously they do not have anything. But in those early stages, they still had some valuables. So the undressing has actually 3 objectives. So the first one, very important, is dehumanization. And those people are not being seen as human beings anymore. And that's why the undressing. The second very important reason is obviously the looting. The Nazis realized very quickly that some Jewish people would hide gold, valuables, money in their clothes, and it was much easier to get them when they undressed before the killing, rather than after that from the dead bodies. And so that's the second reason for the undressing, to get all of those valuables. And finally, the third reason, and I have a great testimony again about this, but I will not be able to show you this testimony, but it is that they cannot escape. When you are naked, you cannot escape. And the testimony that I'm talking about is from this woman, Nina. And when they were requisitioned to cover the grave, actually, from the school after the killing, one girl in the pit was still alive, and she was probably not alone. She asked for help, but she was naked. The policemen, the German policemen, were still there. Nothing was done to save her. When you are naked, you can't escape. So that was the third reason for the undressing. Again, we have many photos from Babi Yar of those Jewish belongings that remained because people had to undress before the killing. Now, this next fourth step is the killing itself. There are many things that we could say about the killings, and I was also planning on showing you a witness in the field, showing us those different places and where the shooting actually was perpetrated, where he was. He's one of the forced. He had to watch the execution. We have no time, but I will still say a few things about the shooting. The first very important thing is that this is a very personal way of killing people. When we think about the Holocaust, we live with this idea of kind of industrialization of the killing. We think about gas chambers. We do not think about individuals who actually participated in this. And this is something that Father Dubois made me realize this week. Even when we speak about the gas chambers, someone had to press the button. Someone had to lead those people to the gas chamber. Someone had to close the door behind them. There were people, individuals involved. And you can see this even more when you look at photos like this one. This is a handmade genocide. Each perpetrator can see his victim, and each victim is going to see his or her perpetrator. And the important thing to say...
volume, Dr. Schaller? Please increase the volume. Thank you.
Oh, can you hear me better now? Is it better?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. So as I was saying, this is very personal, and each perpetrator is going to see his or his victim. Each victim is going to see his or her perpetrator. And when you look at the genocides that are being perpetrated today, they are perpetrated in this very way. We say we do not have camps and we will not have camps, but this kind of a handmade genocide, very personal crime, it continues and is being perpetrated today. Yahad has done a lot of investigations in Iraq on the Yazidi genocide. Those mass killings are perpetrated in this very way. Now we could say more things about, again, how those killings were well organized, how the Nazis were able to even calculate the size of the grave that they should have based on the size of the Jewish community in the village. People who were requisitioned to dig the grave, they knew exactly how deep, how large, how long the grave should be. And many of those people as well, and this is what you will hear in the eyewitnesses' testimonies, many people were not killed when they fall down into the pit. Many victims were still alive. The witnesses oftentimes speak about the grave moving for 3 days. The grave also moved, and we now know this because of different processes that go with the body's decomposition. But the reality also is that many victims were still alive, and they would just die because of the weight of other victims lying on them. and many other things could be added to this, but I think about this individual responsibility then and today of those killings that are being perpetrated. I think it's a very important thing, and this is Father Dubois actually thought that I'm relaying here in a way. This is the photo that Wendy Lauer will be speaking about this evening, so I will not obviously comment on this. The last photo that I wanted to show to you is this one. This is the photo that was taken in Skidi, Latvia. This is December 1941. And you can see here this group of women standing at the edge of the pit. This photo was taken literally a few seconds before they were killed. The perpetrators are somewhere here. And this pit was on a beach. So what they are looking at is the Baltic Sea at the other side. And the last step that Anna mentions as well from her perspective of witness is the looting. And this is what happens basically at every stage of this crime. It can start at the arrest and continue during the road, the undressing, obviously the killing. And then it happens at the very end when the victims are not there anymore. The most valuable things go to the Germans, obviously. Many things are also distributed to those who participated, either the local police, collaborators, sometimes also to the requisitioned people. And in certain cases, the clothes are sold to the locals, and we have many testimonies of people who say that there was an auction which was organized at the end to sell all of what remained. I don't know if you remember this photo from Babi Yar of the clothes, but one of the Einsatz group in the reports mentions that after the mass killing in Babi Yar and then another massacre that was perpetrated 10 days before, they had 137 trucks of Jewish belongings. So Babi Yar, this is 33,000 victims, and this other massacre, it was 4,000 victims. This is how many belongings were left, houses. And again, many attitudes of the local population towards those belongings. Some of them would take without asking themselves any questions. Some of them would say no. So these are those steps that Anna mentions in her testimony. These are these steps of the day of the crime. These are not all the steps of the Holocaust by bullets, obviously. For those who haven't done so yet, you may read, of course, the latest book by Father Dubois, Hidden Procedures Between the Holocaust by Bullets, and you will find more about how those crimes were organized. Now, I wanted to tell you many other things, but I can't. I just wanted to show you this map to finish. This is the map that you can find online. I will show you the address in just a second. So all of those dots are the killing sites that Yahad-In Unum team was able to identify in Eastern Europe. More than 3,000, as I said, as of now. And you can see them all across this operational territory of the Einsatz group and other killing units. The only difference between the blue dots and the red dots is that the information about those locations has been uploaded to the red dots. When you click on a blue dot, it's going to say online soon. The information was not uploaded yet. So this is the address of the map, yahadmap.org, and our website. You can make a search through a location. So if you're interested in a particular location, you may just type the name in the search box and you can look for this. Just one piece of advice: use all the possible spellings if you look for a particular locations, because with those Eastern European names, they are different spellings, and sometimes we do not have all of them on the map. So try all of them to look for this. Thank you so much. I apologize. I know I am late, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schaller. That was a really exceptionally interesting presentation and very informative on Holocaust by the bullets. There's a question here. A woman named Hillary Levine is interested in knowing whether or not there is a cemetery near the Podilsky March. That's where her family lived prior to the war.
I don't know. I'm happy to share my email address. This is just my first and last name at gmail.com. So for this kind of questions, please just email me and I will try to find out. I will ask my colleagues.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's another person who asks, can you give this presentation in Poland now with the restrictive Polish speech laws? Has that affected your work and that of other Holocaust survivors? And has it affected views about the war among the general Polish public?
I will answer very briefly to this question. I would give this presentation. I wouldn't have a problem, but I wouldn't like to get into any discussion about, okay, I should speak. Okay, thank you for the signs from different screens. So my answer was just that I would personally give this presentation, but I wouldn't like to get into a discussion about what's happening in Poland right now, if possible.
And could you also please recommend, I'm familiar because I've worked with you, but could you recommend some books to our people, or again, guide them to your site?
Yeah, so the website is Yahad-In So obviously the books that I can recommend, the two first ones will be Father de Bois books. Two of them were published. The first one is Holocaust by Bullets, and it was published 10 years ago, I think. That's the answer to the question why we do this research. And then the second one came out 2 years ago, The Hidden Procedures Behind the Holocaust by Bullets. And this is a much deeper analysis, actually, of what happened in Eastern Europe and how those killings were organized from this investigative perspective. Really, you have Wendy Lauer, obviously, who is going to speak tonight. And then recently, there are many books that came out also here in the States, because I think this topic is more and more discussed right now.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Schaller. Okay, I'm going to hand over this moment to a colleague and good friend of mine, Cheryl Bronkesh, who is the president of the Phoenix Holocaust Association, with whom I've worked for numerous years. She's been a great supporter of Genocide Awareness Week, and also of working with Yahad and Unum and bringing in someone who will be coming next year. And I'm going to let her give the announcements. So Cheryl.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating this year. And then next year in 2022, Genocide Awareness Week will be moving to Arizona State University, and it'll become a joint project with NAU and U of A. And we hope to see you on the 4th of April, 2022, when we bring Father Patrick Dubois, who is the founder of Yahad-In, to be the keynote presenter. And that's very exciting. John, do I have time to ask Eva one question?
Please, yes.
So Eva, what are Yahad-In's plans after the Holocaust eyewitnesses are no longer alive? These mass shootings happened 79 and 80 years ago. So even if somebody was 10 or 11, they're in their 90s now. What's going to happen?
Many things are going to happen. So the very interesting thing is that we are still able to find the eyewitnesses, and quite a number, actually. I went on a trip even last year to Poland, and we didn't have any problems finding people to speak to us. So the current estimate right now is that we might be doing this investigative work until 2022, so this year and next year, hopefully. And then I think I will let Father Dubois speak about the future when he comes to Arizona next year. But I think a lot of work will be moving into this educational direction as well. There are so many things that can be taught and understood thanks to what we can learn from what happened in Eastern Europe. So I think that will be one of the directions.
Okay. And I encourage everyone, if you haven't signed up yet for Dr. Wendy Lauer's talk tonight, it's about her brand new book that came out just about 6 weeks ago called The Ravine. And it's really a mystery book. And the mystery around that photo that was just shown for step 4 called The Shooting. And she wrote a fascinating book about that photo and her investigation to learn what happened there.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Yes, I concur with Cheryl, and I urge you to register for the 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time presentation by Dr. Wendy Lauer about her new book. And it does fall perfectly into place with what Dr. Schaller has just spoken of. It's like bookends, they're perfect together. So I urge you to watch that. And thank you very much for attending today. This has been recorded. It will go on YouTube at some point soonish. We need to sort out the conference first, but then it'll be up there. So I look forward to